this isn't really about the birth of Jesus, and yet it is. And it really struck me one day, a while back, that this is what God wanted me to talk a little bit about today. Now, I have a very tiny message, truly. And then I have a story that I'm going to tell you. Okay? In the New Living Translation, it says, verse 14, it says, and the Word became human. The Word became human. Human flesh. Let me just tell you that for the Jews and the Greeks, the idea of Jesus, of God becoming a man, was completely amazing to them. It probably stunned them when they read this. Okay? The human world is separate from the sphere of God, especially according to the Greeks. The human world is boring and mundane and trivial. The word flesh, it's flesh. It's like, sarx is the word in Greek, by the way, for those of you who care about such things. So to the Jews and the Greeks, the idea that God would become flesh and dwell among us was almost unimaginable. And then it says that he made his home with us. And the word, I didn't write it down, the Greek word, but the word there means pitched his tent. So the word of God came to earth as in flesh and pitched his tent. And the Jews understood that real clearly, because that's what, if you read the Old Testament, that's what you see what God did. They had the tent set up, and the glory of God dwelt in the tent, and the people came to worship there. But now, Jesus is the manifestation of God's glory. And we worship him, the Word made flesh, the Word made human for us. That's what that is saying. And that's the end of my message. But now I have a story. Dalton's like, are you kidding me? You better give me more than that.
No.
That's some powerful stuff right here.
So he could relate what we would go through. He
Exactly.
went through.
That was unimaginable to most people. That was like, what? What? What are you talking about?
In order to help someone in the world, you have to be able to relate to those people. You have to go through situations. You have to go through trials, tribulations, whatever it might be. Seasons. And then when you've gone through a season, listen, I went through the fire once. I will never go through it again. But I can help somebody else that's going through a fire to get through it, what they're going through.
And that leads me, thank you. God bless you, brother.
Thank you.
That leads me into the story that I'm going to tell you / read. Most of you know the story of the wise men, right? Came from the east, followed the star. We know it. We've heard it before. In 1896, Henry Van Dyke published the story of the other wise man. I was praying one night, and I was up late, and I was searching on the internet, just searching, kind of praying, kind of searching, and this came to me, and I was like, and I couldn't stop reading it. I read the whole thing. And it's a good little, it's not a novel, it's a novella. But I couldn't put it down. I read for a couple hours. And I said, oh man. God said, yeah, that right there. Tell that story on Christmas morning. Or Christmas Eve. And so I shortened it and got it down to where it can be used as a message. So I'm going to read/tell you this story. And I want you to just kind of get comfortable in your seats. Like you're sitting around the tree at home, and somebody, your mom, your dad, your grandparents, somebody is telling a story, maybe a story from the Bible, maybe a story from wherever. But just get comfortable, and I'm going to tell you this story. And I can't promise.
You're not going to cry.
That kid's already happy.
I was going to say, I can't promise I'll make it through without that. When the Spirit of God pours into you, it fills you to overflowing and it leaks out through my eyes. So, anyway, make sure you got some Kleenex, you might need it. So here we go, are you ready? In the days when Augustus Caesar was master of many kings and Herod reigned in Jerusalem, high on the hill overlooking the region of Persia, sat the estate of Artaban, a priest of the Magi, a king in his own right. On this particular night, as he stood on the terrace of his roof, dawn was about to arrive. Artaban was trying to free his mind from all that had happened just hours before, trying to make sense of it, actually. His friends could not comprehend his newfound understanding, that the answers to their questions were no longer in the stars. They refused to go with him on his journey to find the king who was to be born that night. In fact, they had wondered out loud what had happened to Artaban's rational mind. They thought he might be going a little crazy. They had known him as a scientist, not a believer in a child born to become the king and to be the hope of the world out of some vague predictions. And if you remember that song, and what God put in your heart that moment about hope, it's right here. It comes up again. Hope is so powerful. Artaban held on to the knowledge that at least 3 of his colleagues among the Magi believed with him. They understood why he would sell his home and all his possessions and use what he received in order to buy gifts for this king yet to be born. Gaspar, Melchior, and Balthazar would be the ones who would join together with him to journey to find this one to be born king of Israel. He reached into the pocket of his robe and drew out 3 great gems. A sapphire as blue as a fragment of the night. A ruby red as a ray of sunrise. And a great pearl as pure as the peak of a snow mountain at sunrise. A pearl of great price. They were his gifts to the king, his tribute to honor him. He would say, religion without a great hope would be like an altar without a living fire. It would be pointless. Artaban spoke these words, if only to himself. He believed with all of his heart that this child yet to be born would be that hope. As he looked back to the sky, his eyes opened wide with wonder. Out of the darkness began an explosion of color. It was as if the colors of the jewels in his hand mixed together and finally exploded into a point of white radiance. The star shone in the distance. This is it. It is the sign, he said. The king is coming, and I will go to meet him. And before the sun began its journey across the sky, the fourth wise man was in the saddle of his fastest, most trusted horse, riding to meet his friends. Artaban knew he must ride wisely and well if he was to arrive at the appointed hour with the other magi. 15 parasangs, about 50 miles, was the absolute most that he could push the horse to travel in a day. At that place, he would reach the Temple of the Seven Spheres just before midnight on the 10th day, the appointed place and time of the meeting. Artaban's prize horse was almost spent when he arrived at nightfall of the 10th day, beneath the shattered walls of Babylon. He would have turned into the city to find rest and food for himself and his horse, except that he knew that he had 3 hours more of a journey yet to the Temple of the Seven Spheres, and he must reach the place by midnight if he were to find his comrades waiting. So he did not stop, but continued on. A grove of date palms made an island of gloom up ahead of him. As the horse passed into the shadow of it, she slowed her pace and began to pick her way very carefully. Near the farther end of the darkness, caution seemed to overtake the horse. She sensed some danger or difficulty. The grove was close and silent as a tomb. Not a leaf rustled. Not a bird chirped. At last, she stood stock still, quivering every muscle, before a dark object in the shadow of the last palm tree. Artaban dismounted. The dim starlight revealed the form of a man laying across the road. His humble dress and the outline of his haggard face showed that he was probably one of the poor Hebrew exiles who still dwelt in great numbers in that vicinity. The chill of death was in his lean hand, and as Artaban released it, the arm fell back limply onto his motionless chest. He turned away with a thought of pity, resigning the body to that strange burial which the priests of the Magi deemed most fitting, the funeral of the desert, where vultures and varmints would pick the bones clean. But as he turned, a long, faint, ghostly sigh came from the man's lips, and the brown, bony fingers closed on the hem of the priestly Magi's robe and held him fast. Artaban's heart leaped to his throat, not so much with fear, but with a dumb resentment at the inopportunity of the timing, of the possibility of a delay while he was so close to his destination. How could he stay here in the darkness to minister to a dying stranger? What was his duty? If he was delayed for even an hour, he could hardly reach the meeting place at the appointed time, and his companions would think he had given up the journey. They would go on without him. He would lose his quest, the quest he had invested so much in. But if he went now, the man would surely die. His spirit was in agonizing turmoil. Should he turn aside, if only for a moment, from the following of the star, to give a cup of cool water to a poor perishing Hebrew? Oh, God of truth, purity. He prayed, direct me in the holy path, the way of wisdom which only you know. Then he took a deep breath to the sick man. Loosening the grasp of his hand, he carried him to a little mound at the foot of the palm tree. Assuring first that he was comfortable, he brought water from one of the small canals nearby and moistened the sufferer's brow and mouth. He mixed a drink of one of those simple but potent remedies which he always carried in his belt, for the Magi were physicians as well as scientists. And he poured it slowly between the colorless lips. Hour after hour he labored, as only a skillful healer of disease can do. And at last, the man's strength returned. He sat up and looked about him. "Who are you?" he asked. "I am Artaban of the Magi, and I am going to Jerusalem in search of one who is to be born King of the Jews, a great prince and deliverer of all. I cannot delay any longer on my journey, for the caravan that has waited for me may leave without me. Here is all that I have left of bread and wine, and here is a potion of healing herbs. When your strength is restored, you can find your way home." The Jew raised his trembling hand solemnly to heaven. He looked at Artaban. He said, "I have nothing to give you in return for what you have done for me, only this. I can tell you where the Messiah must be sought. For our prophets have said that he should be born not in Jerusalem, but in Bethlehem of Judah. May the Lord bring you safely to that place, because you have had pity upon the sick." It was already long past midnight. Artaban rode as quickly as was possible. The great horse, restored by the brief rest, dipped into her last remaining strength and fled over the ground like a gazelle. Even so, the first beam of sun sent a shadow before the horse as she entered the final steps of the journey, and the eyes of Artaban, anxiously scanning the first glimpses of the temple of the seven spheres, could detect no trace of his friends. He dismounted and climbed to the highest terrace, looking out toward the west. There was no sign of the caravan of the three wise men. At the edge of the terrace, he saw a little pile of broken bricks, and under them a piece of parchment. He picked up the parchment and read, "We have waited past the midnight hour and can delay no longer. We go to find the king. Follow us across the desert." Artaban sat down upon the ground and covered his head in despair. "How can I cross the desert," he moaned, "with no food and with a spent horse? I will have to return to Babylon, sell one of my jewels, and buy a train of camels and provisions for the journey. I may never overtake my friends. Only God the merciful knows whether I shall lose the sight of the king because I stopped to show mercy." So Artaban did indeed return to Babylon, and with his sapphire he purchased what he needed for the journey. Through heat and cold, Artaban, priest of the Magi, the fourth wise man, moved steadily onward, crossing the desert. He arrived, weary, but full of hope, in Bethlehem, bearing yet his ruby and his pearl to offer to the king. "Now at last," he said excitedly, "I shall surely find him. This is the place the Hebrew exile told me that the prophets had spoken of." As he searched for the place where the baby lay, he was aware of the desolation of the streets. There was an eerie quiet. From the open door of a low stone cottage, he heard the sound of a woman's voice singing softly. He entered and found a young mother hushing her baby to rest. She told him of the three wise men that had appeared in the village 3 days ago. and how they said that a star had guided them to the place where Joseph of Nazareth was lodging with his wife Mary and her newborn child. And she told how they had given many rich gifts to the child to honor him. But the travelers disappeared again, she said, as suddenly as they had come. And the man of Nazareth took the babe and his wife and fled away that same night secretly. And it was whispered that they were going far away to Egypt. And ever since, there has been a spell upon the village. Something evil hangs over it. They say that the Roman soldiers are coming from Jerusalem to force a new tax from us, and the men have driven the flocks and herds far back among the hills and hidden themselves to escape it. The young mother laid the baby in its cradle and rose to care for the strange guest. She set food out for Artaban, what little food she had, graciously offered and gratefully received. Suddenly, there came the noise of wild confusion and uproar in the streets of the village, a shrieking and wailing of women's voices, a clanging of swords and desperate cries. "The soldiers!" she cried out. "The soldiers of Herod, they are killing our children!" The young mother's face grew white with terror. She held her child close to her and crouched motionless in the darkest corner of the room, covering him with the folds of her robe, praying he would not wake up and cry. Artaban went quickly and stood in the doorway of the house. His royal bearing filled the opening, blocking any sight of the home within. The soldiers came hurrying down the street with bloody hands and dripping swords. At the sight of the stranger in his imposing dress, they hesitated with surprise. Artaban did not move, but spoke in a low voice. "I am all alone in this place, waiting to give this jewel to the prudent captain who will leave me in peace." He showed the ruby, glistening in the hollow of his hand, like a great drop of blood. The captain barely hesitated, but stretched out his hand and took the ruby greedily. "March on!" he cried to his men. "There is no child here." The clamor and the clang of arms moved down the street. Artaban re-entered the cottage. He turned his face to the east and prayed. "God of truth, forgive my sin. I have said the thing that is not so to save the life of a child. And not two of my gifts are gone. Shall I ever be worthy to see the face of the king?" But the voice of the woman, weeping for joy in the shadow behind him, said very gently, "Because you have saved my life, the life of the little one, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace." So the fourth wise man travels from place to place, beginning in Egypt. He searched among the people of the dispersion. He saw hunger and famine, plague-stricken cities, imprisoned and enslaved people. In all the chaos of the humanity, he found none to worship, but many to help. He fed the hungry. He clothed the naked. He healed the sick and comforted the captive. And the years went by so swiftly, like the weaver's shuttle through the loom, leaving behind a pattern of love and compassion. It seemed almost as if he had forgotten his quest. 33 years of the life of Artaban. Artaban the Magi passed away. And yet, he was a pilgrim and a seeker after light. His hair was now white as the wintry snow, worn and weary and ready to die, but still looking for the King. He had come for the last time to Jerusalem. He had often visited the holy city and searched through all its lanes, crowded hovels, and black prisons without finding any trace of the family of Nazarenes who had fled from Bethlehem long ago. But now it seemed as if he must make one more effort, and something whispered in his heart that at last he just might succeed. It was the season of the Passover. The city was teeming with strangers and many languages. But on this day, there was a singular disturbance visible in the multitude. The sky was veiled with a dark and rolling gloom, and Artaban joined company with a group of people from his own country, Parthian Jews who had come up to keep the Passover. He inquired of them the cause of the disturbance and where they were going. "We are going," they answered, "to the place called Golgotha, outside the city walls, where there is to be an execution. Haven't you heard what has happened? 2 famous robbers are to be crucified, and with them another called Jesus of Nazareth, a man who has done many great and wonderful works among the people, so that they love him dearly. But the priests and the elders have said that he must die, because he named himself as the Son of God, and Pilate has sent him to the cross, because he said that he was King of the Jews." Oh, Artaban's heart beat quickly. Could this be the same one who had been born in Bethlehem 33 years ago, at whose birth the star had appeared in heaven? He said within himself, "Could it be that my last pearl is just in time to offer for his ransom and save his life?" So the old man followed the crowd. Now, just beyond the entrance of the guardhouse, a troop of Macedonian soldiers came down the street, dragging a young girl with a torn dress and matted hair. As the once noble and stately Magi, still priestly in his bearing, paused to look at her with compassion, she suddenly broke from the hands of her tormentors and threw herself at his feet. "Have pity on me," she cried, "and save me for the sake of the God of purity. I also am a daughter of the religion which is taught by the Magi. My father was a merchant of Parthus, but he is dead, and I am being seized for debts to be sold as a slave. Save me from this fate worse than death." Artaban trembled. It was the old conflict of his soul which had come to him in the palm grove of Babylon and in the cottage at Bethlehem. The conflict between the expectation and the impulse of love. The conflict between the gift he hoped to offer the king and the open-faced need right before his eyes. This would be his last time to face this choice. One thing only was sure to his divided heart. To rescue this helpless girl would be a true deed of love. And is not love the sight, the light of the soul? So he took the pearl from his bosom. Never had it seemed so luminous, so radiant, so full of tender, living luster. As he looked at it, a soft and iridescent light, full of shifting gleams of blue and rose, trembled upon its surface. It seemed to have absorbed some reflection of the colors of the lost ruby and sapphire. He took one lost look at it and placed it in the hand of the slave girl. This is your ransom, daughter. It is the last of my treasures, which I kept for the king. While he spoke, the darkness of the sky thickened, and shuddering tremors ran through the earth. It was an earthquake. The walls of the house where they stood in the shadows rocked back and forth. Stones were loosened and crashed into the streets. Dust clouds filled the air. The soldiers fled in terror, but Artaban shielded the girl whom he had ransomed, and they crouched helpless beneath the wall of the praetorium. What did he have to fear? What did he have to live for? He had given away the last gift to the king, his tribute. And with that, he gave up the hope of ever finding him. The quest was open, was over, and it had failed. But even in that thought, there was a peace. He felt a strange peace that seemed to confound his own understanding. It was not resignation, it was not submission, it was something more profound and searching. He knew that all was well because he had done the best that he could from day to day. He had been true to the light that had been given to him. One lingering tremor of the earthquake shot through the ground, and a heavy tile, shaken from the roof, fell and struck the old man on the temple. Artaban lay breathless and pale, with his white head resting on the young girl's shoulder, and the blood seeping from the wound. As she bent over him, afraid he was dead, a sound came through the twilight, very small and still, like music sounding from a distance, in which the notes are clear, but the words are lost. The girl turned her head to see if someone from upstairs had spoken them, but she saw no one. The old man's lips began to move as if in answer. Clearly, he had heard the words, and she heard him say in the Parthian tongue, "Not so, my lord. When did I see you hungry and feed you? When did I see you naked and give you clothing? When did I see you sick and care for you, in prison and visit you?" He stopped talking, and the sweet voice came again. And again, the girl heard it, very faint and very still. But now it seemed as though she too understood the words. She heard this: "I tell you the truth. When you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you were doing it to me." And with that, a calm radiance of wonder and joy lighted the pale face of Artaban, like the first ray of dawn on a snowy mountain peak. And one long, last breath of relief exhaled gently from his lips. His journey was ended. His treasures were accepted. The other wise man had found his king. So, on the eve of the day we celebrate the birth of our Savior, the day that the Word became flesh, this most holy of days, I pray that you ponder this story of the other wise man. And why? Because he lived the very life that Jesus calls all of us to live. The Word became flesh for this reason, to save us and provide a bridge back to our Daddy in heaven, our holy Creator. Listen, Artaban searched his whole life for the king, never realizing until the very end that he was looking into his face every time he attended someone, cared for someone, and prayed to someone. We have that same opportunity every day. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you, God. Thank you for Jesus.
Thank you, God.
Thank you that he was born,
Yes.
he lived, he died, and he rose again. Thank you. In Jesus' name.
In Jesus' name.
Amen. I don't know if we have stuff.
I've got a few things for the kids, maybe. That was a good story.
Excellent.
Good. Enjoy that.
I'd like to invite everybody to come out this evening for our final New Year, Christmas Eve celebration. We've got another message tonight, a candlelight service. That's at 6:30 for those that can make it. We'll have the River Room praise team out again, at least part of them, and have some different songs we'll be singing. So thanks for being here today, and it's good to see a lot of